Hey guys, hope all of you are doing fine. This is the part 15 of the Being Reborn in Marvel with Gamer's ability. Marvel Gamer Part 15. I dragged Hela to Thor, which simply sighed at the revelation. For a few moments he said nothing, staring at Hela, and his father, who I had decided to bring in the end, instead of leaving him in the cave, possibly bleeding out. Thor sighed, trying to find the right words. I gave him his time. This was more his baggage than mine, so I would stick by his side whatever decision he might come to. I found him, talking with her. I sighed, pointing at Hela. My apologies my king, where are my manners? Hela smiled, bowing in a mocking tone. A pleasure to formally meet you. Thor deadpanned. Yeah, I know, she's weird. I nodded. Weird is such a hard word, darling. I'm an acquired taste. Hela grinned. What do you propose, Alex? Thor asked. Don't ask me. I originally wanted to kill her, and maybe you dad, but you know, I love you and all, bros and shit, so. I decided against it, I replied, looking at the unconscious Odin, and Hela, who simply winked in my direction. I see, so you love me. Thor grinned. Is that really what you are going to focus on? I deadpanned. I knew my mighty power had reached deep within you. Thor laughed. Please don't say that. I can hear Zubin moaning across the multiverse. I shuddered with a laugh, remembering my days watching Dragon Ball Abridged. Zubin. Thor tilted his head. It's an inside joke. I waved him off. Okay, so, like me. Thor grinned, before going back to serious mode after a glare from me. Right, what to do with them? He sighed, brushing his long hair with his hands. I vote for execution, the oldest one first. Hela offered. Really? Thor muttered, looking at me. Yes, she has a boner for that. I nodded. She wants to see Odin die, so. Yeah. I sighed. I see. Thor sighed, once again. We could always seal their powers, I offered. That could work. Becoming immortal would teach father many things, and if we are lucky, we could change Hela too. Thor nodded with a smile, liking my idea. Hela, hello, nice to meet you. Also, I'm right here, Hela replied, rolling her eyes. We know you are there, but be silent. The adults are talking, I shot back, which only earned me a lustful grin on her part. Darling, you know how to get a woman ready for a beating, Hela replied, biting her lower lip. I will slap you into a nun. I hissed. Darling, don't promise what you won't deliver, Hela pouted, otherwise I will get all excited for nothing. Okay, that was weird, Thor chuckled. Easy for you to say, I don't have a sister trying to fuck you dry. I rolled my eyes at him. Wait, talking about sisters, where the fuck was Alice? Fuck you dry. Hela laughed. I like the sound of that. How about it, darling? Up for a night of fun? That's it, night time for you, I replied, putting a towel over her bubble. I'm not a bird. Hela exclaimed, but I ignored her. Don't you have Alice? Thor asked, the weird, possibly evil female version of you. Well, yes, but I haven't seen her in a while. I nodded, opening my map to locate her, only to find her level had increased a lot in the short span of a month. What happened? Thor asked with a frown, reading my expressions to a T. He knew what I was thinking. Something here was wrong. Alice was much stronger than she should have been. Alice is doing something, I replied, closing the map. Her power is increasing too fast, something is not right. Thor frowned even more. Now that you say it, the cosmic energy of the Earth is changing, almost as if being gathered. Cosmic energy. I need to look into that. Do you trust her? Thor asked. No, I shook my head. As you know, My powers allow me to see who's an ally, or who's an enemy, and she was never either of those. Thor sighed. Then we must act. If what you are saying is true, and what I feel is correct, she must be gathering the cosmic energy of the planet for herself, and there is no telling how powerful she will be once she absorbs it all. Was there really that much cosmic energy on the planet? Wait, of course, the fucking sleeping celestial within the Earth. If she absorbed that, we would be fucked. That thing in his dormant state was above Thor and me in the rankings. But to absorb that much power, she would need something to avoid imploding, taking the planet with her. Unless, she's playing this by the move, without any safeguards. We must move, I said, opening a portal to Earth. Whatever she was doing, for whatever reason, I would stop it. Chances were she would fail, and the planet and everyone would die with her. I would not allow that. Let's. Thor nodded, his demeanor now that of a warrior, his eyes and aura steeled for what was to come. Darling, not to be a bother, but what about us? Hela asked from within her bubble. I sighed. I'll deal with that, Thor said, using a powerful spell to create magical prisons of untold power to hold them both. There, that should be good enough. I nodded. The cages he had created were vastly stronger than my bubble. Granted, the bubble was meant to be a momentary transport of sorts, nothing more. By the way, your mom is pregnant, I said, walking through the portal. Hopefully this one won't want to kill me or fuck you, Thor laughed. Thor, please, don't, I groaned. Bah, in 1,000 years, those jokes won't be bad, Thor chuckled. Yeah, but now they are awful, so shut it, I sighed. So three sisters, huh? Thor smiled. I didn't even say she was pregnant with a girl, I replied. I have a feeling, Thor shrugged. Well, I guess the third time's the charm, I chuckled. Try to have a good relationship with this one. Hey. I didn't have a good relationship with the first two because of my father, Thor replied in indignation. True, I nodded, closing the portal as Thor finally stepped in. The moment Thor and I entered Earth, Alice's presence disappeared, which meant she knew I was coming for her. I don't feel her anymore, Thor commented, frowning at the thought. I scowled, opening my map to find nothing. She's hiding, I sighed. If she wanted to play dirty, two could play. Equipping the space stone, I sent a pulse of energy around the globe, feeling every single creature dead or alive. Eventually finding Alice, whose energy pulsed back in shock. I found her, I told Thor, opening a portal to her. Alice waved as I stepped through the portal, her eyes glaring into mine. What are you doing? I asked as Thor stepped through the portal. Whatever do you mean? Alice smiled innocently, pouting under my glare. I sighed, looking around, feeling there was someone else in here, someone hidden under a spell, one that reeked of Alice's essence. You fool, no one, Thor spoke, snapping his fingers, revealing a woman tied to a chair, bleeding. Oh, that. I can explain, Alice beamed at us, giggling. Then do, I said in a dangerously low tone. Bah, you called my bluff, Alice grinned, unsheathing her blades from her back. I sighed, you can't defeat me, seize this. I know, Alice winked, before using both of her blades to cut her own head off. I blinked in surprise, as her head fell to the ground with a loud thud, her face morphed into a grin. Mighty fuck, Thor muttered. See you soon, Alice's head winked, and without a second to reply, her head and body exploded into a bloody mess, leaving us with the woman she had tied alone. Whatever Alice was planning, was dangerous. I could see it now as clear as the sun. Her eyes, moments before she cut her own head off, were those of someone full of desperation, of someone with nothing to lose, of someone consumed by despair and agony, and an enemy without nothing to lose is an enemy you have to be wary of. I sighed, approaching the woman to heal her. Mercury, Eternal LV 189. So that's how Alice's been gaining cosmic force, consuming the one within the Eternals. Hi, I waved at the woman, who looked at me with a fearful expression. I'm Alex, I will heal you, is that okay? Mercury said nothing, her eyes expecting pain. I sighed, proceeding to heal her broken body with heal. It seems having terrible siblings runs in your family too, Thor sighed. Thor, too soon, I sighed, as I untied the woman, who the moment I untied her, ran out of the cave at supersonic speed. Not even a thank you, Thor clicked his tongue. Again, too soon, I replied, opening my map once again, sending another pulse to hunt Alice down. However, this time, nothing came back to me. Meaning, 1, she had learned how to avoid my pulse, which was highly unlikely, or she was no longer on the planet. One of the two. I can't feel her, I sighed. Same, Thor replied, closing his eyes. We have to kill her, you know that. Maybe we can stop her, without having to, but yeah, I feel it will come to that, I nodded. Did I want to kill her? No, but so far the tides were not in her favor. Alice Walker POV. My time was coming short. Alex knew what I was up to, or would soon figure out, meaning I had to, great creative. I would not let him, or anyone get in my way. I would burn the universe if necessary. I would stop at nothing, one way or another. The TVA would fall, and I would stand above their crackling ashes. But for that, I needed more cosmic power, enough cosmic power to consume Celestials. For obvious reasons, the Eternals of Earth were out of my reach. Now that Alex knew, I had to move and hunt others outside the planet. Fortunately for me, there were plenty of Eternals around the universe. By my calculations, I would need to consume a few dozens of Eternals to be able to eat the main dish, the sleeping Celestial. Fortunately for me, I had the time and the appetite. Mercury POV. That woman was a monster. The pain she inflicted on me, the joy it brought her. Not even the deviants were that cruel. She was a demon in human skin, a monster amongst the sheep. I needed to tell the others. They had to know. Someone was killing us, someone had taken 8 of us, and had almost taken me. I had to warn them. Ajak had to know. Only she could ask our Maker to aid us, only she could lead us in war, against Alice, and her people. Nick Fury POV. This motherfucker was ghosting me. Me, Nick fucking Fury. No signs of him, no matter where I looked, he was simply gone. Sir, what if he's taking a vacation? One of my agents said. I frowned. If he was, why wouldn't he tell me? Maybe, I sighed, it was the best lead we had, that or he had moved with the blonde idiot. I doubted that was the case, however. Unless that blonde bastard, I muttered. Somehow, someway, he had managed to convince Alex to leave America for the medieval fair of Asgard. Hell no, I was not going to lose the best weapon I had in my arsenal for a space Barbie wannabe. I had to plan, for next time Alex came, I would seduce him with the American dream, by exonerating him from paying taxes all his life. No way in hell I was going to lose our heavy hitter so easily. Emily Walker POV. Today was a special day. My newest friend, Vest, was going to introduce me to her dad, Mr. ARA, which meant our friendship was becoming a serious thing. Not only that, but both would help me cook the best paella in the world so that I could cook it for Daddy. Maybe Daddy and Mr. ARA could be friends, though. Uncle Bucky would get jealous. I'll have to think about it. Hi. Vest waved at me, as I entered the kitchen. Behind her, her dad, Mr. A. Hi. I waved back, tackling her into a hug. "Meet my dad," Ara Vest smiled, pointing at her dad. "Call me Ara, or Ara," Mr. Ara chuckled. "Dad." Vest groaned. Which only made Mr. Ara grin. "I told you to call me Tilda Daddy." I narrowed my eyes. Something here smelled wrong. "Anyhow, I'll be right here if you gals need me," Mr. Ara smiled, taking a seat in the corner of the kitchen, as he apparated a can of Coke to his hand. "I thought you were going to help us," I said, looking at him, before turning to look at Vest. He was Vest's side with a smile. "I am," Mr. Ara grinned, "I'm the tester." "Oh, well, that made sense, I see. Then I hope we don't make a terrible paella then," I chuckled. "Don't worry, I have faith in you too," Mr. Ara smiled, before apparating a book with a cover that said, "No faith for you." Mr. Ara is giving me mixed signals. "Don't mind Dad, he's just unique," Vest smiled. "I'm a collectible," Mr. Ara laughed. I expanded my search for Alice to the entire universe, narrowing the search for her by a lot by only looking through the planets that Eternals it, or species with cosmic power, narrowing the list of planets I had to scan to the hundreds, instead of an infinite number. Now, all I would have to do was wait. Even with my powers, and knowing what I did, scanning such a vast number of planets to every being was complicated, especially if I wanted accurate results. So, for the time being, I would have to sit and wait for Alice to appear, and when she did, I would have to erase her, not fight her, but erase her. Sadly, her plans, or at least what I thought her plans were too dangerous, and talking with her was beyond my power now. She had crossed a line, a delicate line, and I had no other choice but to kill her before the matter went out of my hands, before she absorbed enough cosmic power to surpass me. "Alex." "Ancient One," I greeted, turning around to see her. "We need to talk," the Ancient One sighed, apparating a book to her hand. "What's that?" I asked, looking at the book. "What Alice learned to do what she's doing," the Ancient One replied, giving me the book. "The Book of Cagliostro, legendary item." I frowned. "She stole the book from you?" "For a bit, I didn't even notice, and with it, she learned how to absorb other beings," the Ancient One sighed. "Which means, fuck me, she doesn't need Eternals for her plans, not really. They are simply the most nutrient-filled meal. She simply needs to absorb creatures until her power surpasses mine. After that, she could even absorb me." "I see," the Ancient One said, taking a seat. "You came to the same conclusion. We must stop her, now, not a moment later. If she absorbs enough power, nothing will stand in her way, at least until the universe collapses on itself, in which case, we will all die." "I can't find her," I cursed. "She's hiding from me. She knows how I act. She's me, in a way, not entirely, but she's me, and knows how to avoid me. By the time I find her again, it will probably be too late. This was my mistake. I should have killed her the moment I meet her, but I was naive. I wanted to believe she was not a threat. I felt pity for her, the same pity that didn't push me to kill her when I found her in that cave torturing the Eternal." "Then, don't act like yourself," the Ancient One replied, putting a comforting hand on my shoulder. "She knows you, on a different level. She was supposed to be you, but wrong, so don't act like yourself, for her. The normal you is predictable. Act like her." "Act like her," is the Ancient One really suggesting what I think she's suggesting? "You want me to do what she's doing?" I asked, my mouth forming a thin line as I looked at her with a small frown. "Yes, and unlike her, you can start big," the Ancient One nodded, pointing at the earth. "She wanted me to consume Tiamat. You want me to consume the celestial sleeping within the earth," I stated, my eyes never leaving hers. Yes, and believe me, it's not a plan I'm particularly proud of, but it's the only safe way to stop her. The Ancient One nodded, taking her hand off my shoulder as she slowly floated to a window nearby to look outside. She wants to absorb a celestial, at least that's what we assume, and what best celestial to absorb that one that can't defend itself? I sighed, brushing one of my hands against my hair. I suppose your idea has some merit, not that I was particularly excited about it, but absorbing Tiamat would solve two problems in one, stopping Alice, and the future emergence of Tiamat, that according to my system was 20 years away, an emergence I was meaning to stop. But still, you don't like it, do you? The Ancient One replied. No, I didn't like it, but I was not one to shy away from a good plan, and doing this would stop two incredibly dangerous beings in one simple move, but it would also earn me a few dangerous enemies, the Celestials. There was no way they would overlook someone eating one of their own. But that was bound to happen anyway, so there was no escape. The Celestials becoming my enemies was sadly inevitable, because stopping Tiamat has always been a part of my plans. Very well, I sighed. Read the book then, and learn how to do it. The Ancient One nodded, extending her hand at me. In the meantime, I will take charge of the search. Alice expects you to look for her, not me. She might know you, but she doesn't know me, she added with a smile. I knew what she wanted. Very well, I chuckled, taking out the space stone from my inventory. Ajak Eternal POV. 8 of us killed by a monster in human skin. We had to prepare. The enemy we were facing was well beyond our power to stop, therefore, we were no longer capable of protecting Tiamat, the sleeping celestial, meaning, the only one capable of such now was Arishem, our creator. Only he would be able to stop this new threat. Will he answer? Marjorie asked, her tone laced with fear. To think us, creatures as old as this planet, warriors that have faced monsters in the wake, would cower to such an extent. It frightened me to think of the kind of monster she faced to be like this, to be so afraid. He has to answer. Akris nodded, full of confidence. He will. I nodded, while I wasn't particularly happy about the emergence. This was no longer about humanity, but us surviving, and that was something I could no longer ensure our safety and that of the humans. The Book of Cagliostro was not enough. I figured that much soon enough. After all, it was easy to see that the knowledge within the book was incomplete, a part of something else, a single piece of the puzzle, meaning, Alice was going to use what she thought was a complete spell to absorb a celestial being or try to, possibly dooming us all, because by my calculations, if she failed, the cosmic energy within her plus that of the celestial would implode, causing a cataclysmic event that would erase the entire Milky Way, perhaps even more. I sighed. I knew what I had to do. I had to find what was missing from this spell, and for that, I had to visit the past. Well, now or never, I nodded, equipping the time stone, to travel to the age of Cagliostro, or rather, to a time where his library was still intact. There, I was sure to find the answers to my problems. Taking a deep breath, I moved my hands forward, channeling the power of the stone, concentrating on the time I wanted to visit. As little by little, a green aura started to envelop me whole. Soon after, the time around me come to a halt before going backward. By the time I stopped forcing the flow of time to move at my whim, I found myself in a forest, surrounded by wildlife and trees, and the sounds of nature. Well, that was easy, I muttered, looking around. Who are you? I blinked in surprise, turning around to see who had asked that, to find a man a few meters away staring at me stoically. Cagliostro, Obeng LV 265. Alex, I replied, waving at him. What are you doing here? Cagliostro asked, his eyes never leaving mine. You want the long version or the short one? I asked, tilting my head to the side. Cagliostro said nothing. I came here to learn how to eat other creatures, I replied, resolving to tell him the truth. After all, honesty was the best policy anyway. That's a new one, Cagliostro said for a moment, seemingly befuddled at my answer. Follow me, he added. I smiled, doing just that. I followed Cagliostro through the forest for an hour or so, without talking or anything. The man simply walked, and I simply followed. Eventually, however, this led to me finding myself face to face with his library. The building in question was fucking massive, like 20 stories tall, at least, and was covered in protecting eldritch runes. So, this is. He was gone, apparently. The moment we had reached the library, the legendary sorcerer had decided to ditch me. Rude, I sighed, before jumping to the door. Quite literally, the entrance was at the last level, and the building had no stairs, so it was either jumping, or teleporting, and well, I picked jumping. Landing on the last level, I looked around the entrance, finding it a bit suspicious. For one, it was a bit too dark, like I wasn't able to see shit, and two, there were at least 3,000 runes around, most of them traps. I sighed, sending a pulse of magic to temporarily deactivate the runes. So you are a sorcerer, I heard someone speak behind me, that someone being Cagliostro. Well, kind of, I nodded. In terms of knowledge, the Ancient One was leagues above me. I learned the basics, and stopped. Heck, Emily knew more spells than me, but when it came to raw power, I was unmatched. Then again, I learned tons of spells thanks to the roots of Yggdrasil, so maybe I do know more than the Ancient One now. Follow me, Cagliostro said once again. Are you gonna ditch me again? I asked with a chuckle. Not this time, Cagliostro replied. At least he admitted his shit. I liked the guy. So, what's your name? I asked because while it was true I knew his name, I found it was best to ask anyway. You already know the answer to that question, but if you must address me, please call me Oben, Cagliostro replied. Will do, I nodded. By the way, do the sorcerers of your time used those clothes? Cagliostro asked. Ha! No, my friend and teacher uses clothes much like yours, I replied with a small smile. Imagine the Ancient One wearing what I was wearing, sweatpants, and a sweater. Good, you dress weird, Cagliostro replied with a chuckle. Hey! I dress for comfort, nothing beats the sweatpants and sweater wombo combo. Not for the eyes, Cagliostro chuckled. I followed Cagliostro once again, this time, however, having a pleasant conversation with him about various topics. Eventually, though, our pleasant conversation came to an end, the moment Cagliostro opened the doors to his library, revealing thousands upon thousands of books, books I had never seen, books the Ancient One had never seen. I grinned, for I knew what I had to do. Besides learning how to eat a celestial, I would copy every book in this library, and give them to the Ancient One, effectively reviving the library of Cagliostro. Bringing back the lost books. So, how long will you be staying here? Cagliostro asked. I paused, pondering over that. I don't know, time is relative when you can travel through it. Fair enough, Cagliostro shrugged, walking away. If you need me, don't call me. Ha ha. I snorted. I liked the guy, too bad he was super dead in the future. With Cagliostro gone, I snapped my fingers, sending a wave of magic around the library, drawing dozens of books off the shelves, making them orbit around me, as I perused the titles. Those books better be back in their place. Cagliostro shouted from the shadows. They will be. They would, I mean, I'm not organized, but having the time stone fixes that. Now, enough talk, it's time to learn, after all, time is on my hands. Quite literally. I wonder how the Ancient One will react when I give her the books. Kneeling on the floor, I opened another book on the subject of soul transmutation and started to read. I had lost count of how many books I had read so far, or how many days I had spent in the library, weeks, months. I guess it really didn't matter. The book I had opened described in great detail how to gain power through the absorption of other beings, and how the ritual in question changed depending on the being. The process seemed easy enough. According to the book, all I had to do was carve a runic circle following clear instructions to summon the being I wanted to absorb, and then pull his soul into mine, overpowering his, with mine. Needless to say, this particular spell was seemingly easy, was deceivingly hard, for it required a vast array of rather complicated runes and spells to work, with each one having to be perfect, for even the slightest mistake could lead to an unstable fusion. But I wasn't worried, not for me, my powers left very little room for error. I was worried about Alice, and the damage she could do to my universe in this quest of hers. Why do you seek to absorb another being into you? Cagliostro asked, snapping me out of my train of thought. Not that I want to, but is either that or the end of all life, possibly, I sighed, turning to face the old sorcerer. I see. Cagliostro nodded, seeming to muse over my answer. Is it an absolute point you seek to prevent? I shook my head, my lips forming a thin line before answering, no. It's complicated. I sighed, brushing my hair with one hand as I tried to organize my thoughts. I find all stories have a beginning. Cagliostro smiled, taking a seat on the floor in front of me. I chuckled. He was almost like the Ancient One. I guess I can share if you are willing to hear. He nodded, giving me the green light to go. Well, let's see. Are you aware of the multiverse? Forget, stupid question, like 60 books you wrote. Talk about it for a moment there. I had forgotten he was the author of several books I had read about the subject. Anyway, a version of me, that's not really a version of me, came to our universe, and from the get-go, it was easy to see she was unstable. How so? Cagliostro asked. Well, she was the literal definition of crazy, but that was okay. It was something I didn't mind that much. I sighed, closing my eyes for a second. The thing was, I never felt completely relaxed around her. You see, my powers allow me to see and feel with certainty who's an ally or who's not, and she never was an ally. But she wasn't an enemy either. Cagliostro concluded. Yes, she was in the in-between, the gray area, not an enemy, not an ally. I nodded. I attributed that to her not trusting me, or to things of her past, and decided to give her time. But well, she decided to do something really dangerous. She decided to eat a celestial, with an incomplete spell of yours. I see. Cagliostro sighed, and I suppose you intend to do just that, but before her, right? Yes, sadly, when I discovered what she was doing, I didn't deal with her properly at the time. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, to let her explain, but instead, she escaped my grasp, and is, as we speak, absorbing power to have enough to eat the celestial, and well, if she fails, we are fucked. I sighed. Do you seek to save her? He asked, and for a moment, I pondered over his question. At one time, sure, I did, but now? No, she was far too dangerous, too unpredictable to be left alive. She was a threat I didn't have the luxury to ignore. No, I replied, my tone full of resolve as I looked into his eyes. Cagliostro nodded, and without a word left, without looking back, I wasn't sure if he was judging me or contemplating my answer. I honestly did not care. Alice had to die. She had carved her own destiny in blood, and now, she had to reap what she had sowed. After all, you eventually have to face up to the consequences of your actions. After a few extra days of research, it was time to test the spell and see how it worked at first hand. Drawing the runes on the floor with a simple thought, I pushed my body a few feet above the air, levitating my entire body while crossing my legs, setting myself in a comfortable sitting position mid-air. "Here goes nothing," I said, activating the runic circle. Invoking my first creature, a giant black bird with 6 eyes, sighing I looked at the creature who defiantly roared in my face before proceeding with the spell. Light pouring out of my eyes and mouth, I pushed the creature into a merging state, transforming his very being into pure energy as thousands of feathers flew off the creature merging with me, as the beast roared defiantly fighting my pool before I finally managed to absorb its entire being. I panted. The merging process had been weird. I could feel the creature, no longer as an individual, but as a part of me. I could also feel all of his power, being mine. I was stronger, that much I knew, not by much, but enough to be noticeable. The creature itself had given me a few levels, just by consuming it. Not only that, but all that made this creature unique, his power, his memories, everything. Well, this will come in handy, but before I jumped the rope, I had to confirm it would not bring me any side effects. The last thing I wanted was to turn into an eldritch being because of it. It has been a month since I absorbed the 6-eyed raven during my testing of the spell I was supposed to use with Tiamat. So far, no side effects had come to light. Beyond getting the creature's power and memories, I remained the same. It basically felt like I had watched a movie, one that had stuck with me, a movie about the creature, but nothing else. I felt normal. Stronger, but normal. So my conclusion so far was that the spell was safe to use. Granted, I had yet to absorb anything else, and chances were the many could prove to be a problem to my individuality. But enough about that. Time to eat some tasty corn. "How is every going so far?" Cagliostro asked, walking into the room. It had been over a month since we last talked, our conversation ending with him leaving the room without a word, making me think he was offended or disappointed in the path I had taken. I wonder what brought him here. "Good," I replied with a quick nod, my eyes never leaving the book I was reading. "I see you already absorbed a magical beast into you," Cagliostro commented, his lips forming a small smile bordering the line of amusement. "I did," I nodded, closing my book to look at him. "So, any side effects?" he asked, taking a seat on the floor. "None so far," I shook my head. "What did you absorb?" he asked. "A 6-eyed raven. Not sure how unique the creature was, but it was a good first try," I shrugged. "So, is that pile of corn behind you a side effect, or just your everyday lunch?" Cagliostro asked, hiding a small smirk under his hand. I blinked, turning to look at the pile of corn I had eaten before replying. "What that is, or not, it's inconsequential," I replied, wondering if the cosmic raven I had consumed had given me a taste for corn now. "The spell will change you, no matter what." Cagliostro chuckled. "It won't be a big change, but it will be big enough to be noticeable. Remember, you are making someone's life yours, and that includes everything that makes them. Therefore, small details from them will remain, be it their love for corn," he pointed at the corn behind me, "or their taste in music. So I could turn into a monster if I consume more. If that was the case, this spell was a terrible idea to use." Cagliostro shook his head. "No, that won't happen. The changes only change things if you are open to those things, meaning, you can only turn into a monster if you are a monster already." I mused at that for a brief moment, thinking over the implications before asking, so it only gives me trays I'm willing to embrace. Yes, and no, Cagliostro chuckled, his eyes looking into mine, it gives you trays you wouldn't abhor. For example, the corn. Is the corn bad? Do you hate it? Would you hate someone for consuming it? I shook my head. Exactly, Cagliostro smiled. This was confusing. Don't frown though, eventually those trays will disappear if you yourself don't attach to them, Cagliostro added with a small sigh. Depending on who you absorb, the trays will go away in a month or two. With a celestial I suppose the trays would last more, no idea though, as is never been tried before. So they only remain if I embrace them, I hummed. That didn't sound so bad. Yes, Cagliostro nodded, only for your case, your body is symmetrically dangerous. Anything that breaks that symmetry will eventually be purged unless you make it part of your symmetry. Cool then, I smiled. For the next few days, I started to absorb other creatures to master the spell, my goal. Leveling the skill to a level high enough to ensure complete success with the celestial mission. So far, I had absorbed many magical creatures, a werewolf, a vampire, a werefox, a wurikro. That one was unexpected, a were-raven. That one not so much after the wurikro, a cat with untold demonic powers, a dog with wings, a hentai actor. I mean, a tentacle monster, and a few extra ravens like the first one. Each creature was strong enough to give me a few levels, which made leveling absurdly easy, but full of guilt. I mean, I was killing them, and that didn't make me feel exactly proud of the power I was obtaining. That was until I found out that all of them were evil, especially the cat. His memories made me throw up, such evil, within such a cute package. Stats. Stats. Name equals Alex Walker. Race equals unknown. Title equals The Gamer. Occupation equals Prince of Asgard. Level equals 798. EXP equals 98%/100%. HP equals 8,947,500/8,947,500. MP equals 10,740,000/10,774,000. STR equals 19,875, plus 7,950, equals 29,475. VIT equals 17,895. Definite equals 11,247. DEX equals 9,125. Int equals 21,548. Char equals 6,625. Wiz equals 15,478. Will equals 8,215. Per equals 6,456. LUK equals 6,000. Stat points equals 3,480. Money, 22,108,742,952 $. After my battle in the Beyonder Games, my level had ended around 460, then I reached the roots of Yggdrasil, and my level increased a lot, the highest boost in level I had ever gotten, leaving my level around 670, roughly around 50 levels below Thor. Now, since I started eating other creatures, well, I had leveled up 128 times. This shit was broken. Which makes me wonder. Can I eat creatures from my dungeons? Can I absorb them, and gain their power, or would I only get the EXP they are intended to give? The Ancient One POV. It has been 5 minutes since Alex left on his journey to find the secrets of Cagliostro. Alice remained hidden, I had thought Alex's disappearance would bring her out of her hiding place, which would have made our job to eliminate her remarkably easy, but sadly, she remained in the shadows, making our job harder than it had to be. She had to know it was inevitable for her to fail, but then again, logic and madness rarely meet. By the end of the month, when the cold of winter had started to permeate the area, I had finally with total certainty learned the spell I had come to learn in the library of Cagliostro. Not only, but I had also copied every book in the library, storing each copy in my inventory. All that was left to do, was go back to my time. There was nothing left for me here. You're leaving? Cagliostro asked, his voice quiet. I nodded with a broad grin on my face as I turned to look at him. Your knowledge has been most helpful. Without all of this, I wasn't sure how I would have dealt with Alice. I had acquired power I didn't expect to acquire. All and all, this venture had been most successful, in more than one account. Cagliostro nodded, offering the faintest of smiles. I hope you save your time, sorcerer. Of that, there's no doubt, I replied, my voice flat and rough. Alice had dug her hole, and now she would reap what she had sown. Whatever sense of familiarity I felt for her was inconsequential, irrelevant. My priority was to keep my daughters safe from anything. I opened a rift back to my time using the time stone as a conductor for the flow, appearing once again in my office. The clock on the wall showed I had been missing for an hour or so, meaning I hadn't been able to enter the same point in time I left. I need more training with this time-traveling business, I muttered, taking a seat on my desk, waiting for the Ancient One to appear. As if on cue, a portal opened in the middle of my office, sparkling embers of orange tint magic all over the place. As the Ancient One stepped into the room, Alex. Hi, I smiled. You have changed, the Ancient One said, lips pressed together. I smiled, realizing what she was thinking without much problem. I'm the same, just a few new things, like a love for corn. I shrugged, giving her a half-hearted smile. I see, the Ancient One nodded, before extending her hand towards me. Here, she smiled, opening her hand to reveal the space stone. I chuckled, sure, not like I need the stone now anyway. I grabbed the stone and grinned at her. I have a gift for you, a very good one. Mr. Walker, the Ancient sighed, giving me a quizzical smile. What will Sif think? You come back from the depths of time and space, and you bring me something without bringing her anything. I laughed. It's cool, there wasn't anything for her, where I was anyway. With a snap of my fingers, I pulled one of the books I had copied from the library out of my inventory in a blue flash of light and gave it to her. The lost books, the Ancient One muttered, a dimpled smile forming on her face. You brought one of the books back with you. But, what about the paradoxes? Will us having this be safe? I grinned. I copied the book, the real one is still lost. I winked. The Ancient One beamed at me, grabbing the book like it was the best thing she had ever seen. Now it was time to knock her out. So, where do you want the rest? I asked. She blinked, seeming to think over what I had just said for a few long seconds before she unintelligibly muttered, others. I copied every single book in the library. I shrugged. I knew I was awesome, why even try to hide it? I chuckled. She was truly at a loss for words. Look, how about this? You tell me where you want them later, is that okay? I must apologize. I lost my composure for a moment. The Ancient One smiled. As for where I want them, well, nowhere, for now. As much as this knowledge is the dream of many sorcerers, I can't trust anyone with it. Beyond ourselves, that is. This might be one of those things only our group can access. I see. For a moment there I had forgotten these books had the knowledge to give people power beyond their dreams. Even the weakest sorcerer could in time become a threat, absorbing other creatures. She was right. This was knowledge best kept between us. I agree, I nodded. Good, now, let's focus on the matter at hand, the Ancient One nodded, her eyes staring into mine. Consuming the Celestial, right? I nodded. Yes, the Ancient One replied, before sighing. Alice is still nowhere to be seen, so it's best if we do this as quickly as possible. Well, before we begin, we need to find the Nexus. Absorbing Tiamat from any other place would be a hassle. Something as big and as powerful as Tiamat was bound to have a massive soul, so the closer I was to the center of that, the easier it would be to assimilate. Way ahead of you, I assume you would need such, and with the help of Thor, I had found the Nexus of Tiamat, though, as of now, it is heavily guarded by the remaining Eternals, as they call themselves, the Ancient One replied. Well, quite frankly, dealing with them won't even be a problem, I shrugged. Alice was able to overpower them, so they won't delay me at all. True, but it is never wrong to be extra careful, the Ancient One nodded. So, let's go. I offered. Yes, let's, the Ancient One nodded, as with a smile she opened a portal to the Nexus. A lot of things would change soon, a lot of stuff would never be the same. Of all things I thought I was going to do in this world, eating a Celestial was not one of them. Quite frankly, life has not been what I expected since my arrival here. But, I was happy, and today, I would kill for that happiness. I stepped through the portal with the Ancient One to the Nexus area, immediately noticing the place felt ancient, as old as the planet itself, brimming with life all around. The Nexus was huge, at least a few miles wide from what I could tell, and was vibrating vividly with waves of cosmic energy. It was truly a miracle to behold how the Nexus siphoned the cosmic energy the dreaming Celestial emanated from, getting out back to the Nexus point, all in a marvelously efficient way, as to prevent leakage before it was time for the Celestial to wake up and emerge. Stop right there! I heard someone shout in a shrill. Ikri's Eternal, LV 202. We mean you no harm, the Ancient One was the first to reply, as she floated towards them slowly. And yet, you have killed most of us, Ikris growled, his voice tight and full of anger. That was Alice, not us, I replied, taking a deep breath, so leave, before I am forced to hurt you. If given the choice, I would prefer to spare them. Sure, their job was basically to farm humans to feed the Celestial within the Earth's crust for its emergence, but that didn't mean I wanted to kill them. Directly speaking, they had done nothing to me or the humankind, beyond protecting them from the deviants, so even if their goals were less than virtuous, what they had done so far had been nothing but beneficial for humanity as a whole. Don't worry, you won't hurt me, I will hurt you. Ikris growled, making the Ancient One sigh as she stepped out of the way as the rage-blinded Eternal charged at me, blasting a beam of pure cosmic energy from his eyes to my chest. I didn't move, letting the blast hit me. Perhaps if he realized his laser did nothing to me, not even burning my clothes off, he would desist from this futile endeavor and go home. Sadly, this Eternal seemed to be rather hot-headed, because even after his laser did nothing, he continued his assault on me, turning his advances to a more physical approach. Very well, I sighed, as the Eternal attacked me with all his might, throwing punches, kicks, and the occasional laser, all attacks being strong enough to level buildings down, but not strong enough to wrinkle my clothes. Must you indulge this? The Ancient One inquired, raising an eyebrow at me accusingly. Yeah, I nodded, slapping the Eternal away, effectively knocking him down with a single humiliating strike that would probably damage his fragile ego more than his body in a few hours or so. Please, do slap the next ones a bit faster, we are running behind schedule as it is, the Ancient One sighed, floating away into the center of the Nexus point. I nodded, following her close behind, only to feel someone trying to probe my head violently. I frowned, opening my minimap to see a red dot hiding behind some rocks. Another Eternal, the one I had saved apparently. I sighed, extending my hand towards the rock before using my control over gravity to pull her towards me at Mach 1. Slamming against my open hand, I looked at Marjorie and asked, "Wasn't your power being super fast?" Marjorie froze, her breathing accelerating under my grasp, her muscles tensing as she started to sweat profoundly, her eyes going wide and her whole body started to shake. I didn't need my power to tell me she was terrified. "Let her go," I heard someone shout. Soon after, feeling something hit my back, something pointy that shattered upon contact, a spear, maybe a sword, made out of cosmic energy. Athena Eternal LV-200. I sighed, this was going nowhere, time to be efficient. "Sleep!" I shouted, using macro to order every creature in a 100-mile radius to fall asleep, with the only exception being the Ancient One. Immediately after, Athena and the rest fell to the floor, not without having some expressions of shock, probably coming to understand that they never had a chance to begin with. Funny enough, Athena and one other Eternal didn't appear in my minimap as red dots, but as green. I wonder why. "You could have done that," the Ancient One said, giving me a look that said, "Really?" It's a new power, first time I actually use it in a fight," I chuckled, approaching the center of the nexus point. "Very well, you know what to do," the Ancient One smiled, levitating the bodies of the Eternals out of the way, as I proceeded to carve the runic circle to start the spell. Each rune had to be perfect. The being I was absorbing was stronger than me. The only advantage I had over him was my age and current state of being. Tiamat, while powerful, was a newborn, and during the merging, he would be confused and disoriented, being that the only moment I would have to overpower his will. Done, I sighed. The runic circle was complete. Now, all that was left was to start the process. "Alice is back on Earth." "She's here," the Ancient One announced, making a vast array of magic circles around me. "I will buy you time, so start the ritual." I nodded, letting myself be immersive in the next step, pulling Tiamat's essence into my soul. The Ancient One POV. A bright light engulfed Alex away, as a battle of wills began, meaning as of now, Alex was at his most vulnerable. "Well, hello there, Alice," I replied, turning to face her. "That's me." Alice giggled, turning to look towards the ball of light that was Alex and Tiamat with a glare brimming with hate. "You won't touch him," I declared, floating in her direction. Alice blinked, grinning from cheek to cheek. "Stop him." "Oh my, of all people, I expected you to be more intelligent. I have him right where I want him." She had him right where, no, could it be? "You want to absorb him." Bingo. Alice beamed at me. I knew the moment I started absorbing Eternals that Alex would notice, like I knew the spell I had learned was an incomplete mess, so I played the long game. I mean, absorbing a Celestial at my current level would take years, even if I absorbed every Eternal in existence, so why not have Boy Me do it for me? I mean, he had the tools to find the right spell, and the power to see it through, so why not? Not only do I get his absurd powers, but I get the Celestial as well if I eat him, in the process, becoming the original. "I will stop you," I replied, forming 2 eldritch circles around me, "and if I fail, others will." "Like Thor." Alice laughed. "I'm mad, not stupid. The Little King is currently fighting an invasion on his home planet, one that requires his attention, so that leaves the only threat to my plans out." Before I could reply, a green and black portal opened in the middle of the room, revealing no other than Hela. "Does it now?" "He let you out?" Alice sighed. Well, seeing as he's fighting a horde of black goo monsters, he had no choice but to let me out. Hela grinned, summoning a pair of blades to her hands. Ancient One, how long till Alex finishes his meal? Not long, I replied with a smile, realizing what Thor had done. Hela was not to be trusted, but the seal he had carved into her soul made it so it was impossible for her to betray us, lest she wanted to explode and die. Good. Hela nodded. Don't you love Alex? Alice asked, smiling at Hela. I'm him, in a way, and soon, I will be him completely, so help me, and I will give you what you desire. Darling, I want Alex, not you. Those credits don't transfer. Hela scoffed, rushing into battle. The moment I started the ritual, something changed, or rather broke. The once vibrant place brimming with cosmic energy and life, morphed into a white endless room, with no one but me standing in the middle of everything. I frowned. Never before had this happened. I knew the ritual, and how it worked very well. I absorbed countless creatures to test it out, to know what to expect, and it had never led to this. Perhaps this was Tiamat's mindscape. Or something else. I mean, in reality, I knew nothing about absorbing celestials. For all I knew, the process of absorbing a celestial was simply different. He was, after all, exceedingly different from all the eldritch beings I absorbed. Not only he was more powerful, but he was bigger. Not only that, but his energy was nothing like that of an eldritch being, so who knew what kind of effect the runic circle would have on him? It was after all made to summon and subjugate eldritch beings, not celestials. Hi, I heard someone say in a monotonous tone, snapping me out of my train of thought. Hi. I replied, looking around. I'm not here, or is it there? The voice replied. I continued to look around, but no matter where I looked, white was all that was to be seen, nothing less, nothing more. So, who are you? I sighed. I am the one you are trying to eat. I'm not sure that's the right term, is it? So he was Tiamat. Great, this complicates things. It's not the right term, but it's accurate, I replied. Why? Tiamat asked, sounding curious. Well, 2 reasons. 1, you will destroy the planet when you emerge, and 2, a rather unstable version of me, from an alternative universe is trying to eat you, and, well, that can't end well, I replied, finding myself a bit surprised. I hadn't intended to reply that. What the hell is happening to me? I see, Tiamat replied. I can sympathize with your cause. He can. You can. I think I can, Tiamat replied. I blinked. That was unexpected. I wasn't expecting that. I chuckled. I wasn't either, Tiamat replied. I expected a monster, to be honest, I replied, once again finding myself saying things I didn't, or rather shouldn't say. I don't blame you for that thought, Tiamat replied. I sighed, checking my status, to find a particular buff in place, one that in this place could not be lifted, one that forced anyone within to be honest, for in the merging of souls both beings bear their souls open to each other, hiding nothing. So, what now? I asked, taking a seat on the white floor. As I waited for an answer on the cold floor of the room, something started to form a few feet away. At first, it looked like a normal person, at least its silhouette, but as time passed, that changed, leaving what I imagine a celestial would look in human size. It seems I'm here now, Tiamat commented, looking at his body in befuddlement. It seems you are, I replied. For a moment, Tiamat said nothing, simply staring at me with a dead gaze, almost as if peering right into my soul. This continued for a few uncomfortable minutes until he decided to take a seat on the floor like me, and with a soft yet firm tone, he said, "Tell me a story." What? Of all the things I had been expecting him to say, that was not one of them. I apologize, what I meant to say is. Tell me your story, Tiamat replied. Why? I asked, frowning. I want to know you before I become a part of you, Tiamat replied. You are a good person, I can see it, or feel it. Not sure which, but I feel like you are a good person, and between you and I have no desire of emerging anyways. I might not be awake, or fully conscious under the earth's crust, but I am very aware. I have seen humans fight, grow, change, hate, love and more, many times over. I suppose in a way I have grown to care about them. I really wasn't prepared for any of this. I expected a fight, a struggle, and he seems to be letting me take his life like it's nothing. You can feel it, don't you? Tiamat asked, tilting his head slightly to the left, my energy becoming yours. I blinked. Now that I think about it, I do feel something different. The moment he showed up in this room, something changed. I feel more aware of my body, more aware of his power, of everything. Merging 1% done. So you give your life for love? I asked, looking into his eyes. I suppose, yes, I give my life for love. In a way, I think of humanity as my children. I'm not sure, Celestials don't have families or children, not normally, so I'm not sure the sentiment is the same you have for your children, but of what I am sure, is that I am willing to die to keep humanity safe, Tiamat replied, seeming to struggle with his words. What story do you want to hear? I asked, thinking over my situation, how life changes without you even realizing. When I came here, I expected to have a fight, and in a way, I got it, emotionally speaking, because I was now struggling with a moral dilemma more complex than the one I first prepared to face. Instead of being forced to eat a bad guy, I was being forced to eat a good one. Merging 1.5% done. Your story, Tiamat replied, and so, I began to tell him everything there was to know about me, about Alex, about the man before and after his rebirth. It had taken me 2 hours with the help of magic to tell my story, showing Tiamat everything I knew, everything I had gone through, my life, a story, his last request. Merging 98% done. So we are all stories, Tiamat replied. How vexing, and utterly terrifying to think we are nothing, and at the same time, beings with untold power, I guess. In a way, everyone is bound to be powerless somewhere, even my kind. I'm sorry for eating you, I sighed. Don't be, this is better than the alternative, dying and letting my power go to waste, Tiamat chuckled, the first sign of emotion I had seen in him. With you having my power, I have no regrets. I die knowing humanity will be safe. I will do my best, I promised. I ask for no more, Tiamat replied. Merging complete. I slowly opened my eyes, feeling a soft breeze brushing against my face as I dwelled on Tiamat's words, his sacrifice, and how happy he had been. By all means, I was his killer, and yet, he had welcomed his end. I sighed, closing my eyes for a brief moment, taking the moment in, before focusing on the matter at hand, Alice. With my objective at hand, I teleported to where Alice was, to find her clashing weapons with Hela. By the looks of it, Alice was winning, having Hela in a rather poor state, bleeding all over with various cuts and gash wounds decorating her body from top to bottom. Even so, Hela wasn't giving up, fighting Alice with a wild grin on her face, welcoming the challenge. Enough, I commanded, using macro, to force both fighters to freeze in place. And the king arrives, Hela grinned. But it should have taken you longer to overpower the big oaf. Alice roared, but I ignored her, floating towards Hela. I have no doubts you did this for some ulterior motives, but thanks, I smiled, placing my hand on her shoulder, healing all of her wounds before realizing her from my magical hold that kept her from moving. What can I say, darling? I'm a warrior, and the moment Thor offered me a chance to fight a strong opponent, I hardly could say no to that. Hela smiled. I nodded, turning my focus to find the Ancient One, which according to my map, was a few meters away from here, laying on the floor in critical condition. Without a second thought, I rushed to her side and healed her wounds. Are you okay? I asked, helping her stand up. I am now, Mr. Walker. The Ancient One smiled, her gaze fixated on Alice. I didn't imagine she would overpower you this way, I sighed, feeling a bit guilty from letting her deal with her technically alone. Worry not, Mr. Walker, she simply prepared for me very well. It wasn't a matter of power, it was a matter of preparation. She damaged the part of my soul in Dormammu's dimension, using a rather vexing spell that transferred that damage to my real body. If it wasn't for Hela and your potions, I would have died the moment she arrived. She sighed. I was simply too careless. I had almost forgotten the situation with her soul. I will fix that situation, don't worry. The Ancient One chuckled. As you are now, I suppose there's no reason to be afraid, at least not entirely. She smiled. Darling, not to interrupt a moment or anything, but crazy over here needs to be dealt with, and yes, I see the irony in that, but it takes crazy to know crazy, and she's leagues above me in that department. Hela interrupted, her cold gaze laying upon Alice, who simply mumbled under her breath. I nodded, walking towards Alice. You took everything from me. Alice chuckled in a deranged way, tears dropping like a dam that had just been broken. You took my chance to recover it all. You are the reason I lost it all. Why must you keep taking from me? She exploded in a wail, her eyes staring into mine. I said nothing, putting my hand over her head. It was time to see what drove her to this. Alice's mind. I peered into Alice's soul, reaching her memories, her first day on Earth, filled with confusion, not only at her gender that for her seemed to be wrong, but at her sudden awakening. Then getting kidnapped by Hydra. Until that point, both of our stories were relatively the same. However, Alice's power developed exponentially, and soon proved too much for Hydra to control. She, however, remained in Hydra just enough to love someone, Emily, with her being the catalyst for her sudden evolution into an unstoppable killing machine. From there, she lived with Emily roaming the country, and she was happy. It didn't matter anymore that she was a woman, all that mattered was the love she had for little Em. For that love, she killed Jean before she could even reach a state of danger. For that love, she killed Fury, who tried in her universe to blackmail her. At every turn, wondering if what she felt was the love of a mother or that of a father. Eventually, she came to answer, and that was, she didn't care. She loved Emily, and Emily loved her back, and that was all it mattered. She grew stronger, she trained for that every single day. After all, she had something to protect. She systematically killed everyone that represented a threat. Then, the TVA came. She didn't have time to react, her universe was simply gone in an instant, with it, the one person she loved. Madness and despair finally overtook her, as she realized someone had saved her and not Emily. She knew that person had the power to do so, she felt it, and yet, he did nothing. She was powerless, she felt powerless, and for a while, she wallowed in despair, jumping from timeline to timeline, seeing how every version of her, of the original, was being targeted by the TVA. Was he even around? Did he even exist? Or had the TVA already killed him? She knew we weren't supposed to be, not as much as I knew, but she knew. She wondered, in a flicker of her old self, Was I suffering just like her? No, the almighty being that saved her replied, appearing to her side, showing her my world, offering her a place in it, a chance to have what she had lost. She raged, everyone else, but the cause of her existence were suffering, and the being that could have saved her offered crumbs. She wanted to kill him, but she knew best, and instead happily accepted his offer, coming to a new resolution: if the copies were destined to suffer, she would become the original, so that no one could take anything from her any longer. From that point on, everything checked, falling into place like a solved puzzle. Back to the real world. It took me roughly 1 second to read her story, my mind absorbing every little detail, every event, every tear she had shed. "I'm sorry," I apologized. "I wasn't to blame, not directly, but I still felt petty for her. Who knew what I would have done if someone had killed Emily?" "I hate you," Alice wailed, laughing every now and then. "I hate you all. I will avenge her, your Emily, every Emily and version of me that suffered at their hands. I promised. I will destroy the TVA, and make them suffer, so, rest in peace, Alice." With that said, I offered her the best I could, a painless death by erasing her existence, seeing a small smile on her face on her last moments. Finally in the top 100. I knew I would reach that line one day, but I never expected it to happen so soon. I sighed, turning around to greet Thor, who teleported to Earth using a beam of light that hit the ground with earth-breaking power. "Brother." He grinned, approaching me with beaming eyes. "How's Asgard?" I asked. If memory served me right, Alice had opened multiple portals to an eldritch dimension that had monsters very similar to the symbiotes, monsters that were a bit more feral in essence. Good, it was more bothersome than hard to deal with, really. Thor sighed. "It just took some time," he added, turning his gaze to Hela. "As you can see, I did what I was told." Hela smiled, her eyes shining in a prideful manner. "She did," I nodded. "Good." Thor nodded, before chuckling, "God, and by that I mean, me, competing with you is a rather exhausting task, brother. Just a day ago, I was stronger than you, but once again, you leave me in the dust, quite literally. Granted, you ate a planet baby to do that, but still." He pouted. I snorted. "I doubt there's anyone strong enough to pose a threat to you now," Hela commented. "Poor ignorant child. There are exactly 96 beings above me in power," I replied, which was more than enough to make her eyes go wide. "That monster is amongst them, right?" Thor asked, and immediately I knew to whom he was referring, the Beyonder. Of course I nodded. His power was leagues above mine, even now, but I was getting closer, climbing that ladder one step at a time. I figured. Thor sighed as he looked aimlessly into the sky before deciding to shout, "Oh well, time to train." I chuckled. "I will reach your level soon enough, brother. So just wait." Thor beamed, laughing like a madman while opening a portal to Asgard. Well, as much as I liked battling the lunatic, and the bit of freedom I was given, I'm afraid it's my time to go as well. Hela sighed, walking towards Thor. "I am reluctantly ready for my punishment, Thor. But don't worry, I will go easy on you. I mean, it's not the first time a sibling has tried to kill me. By the age of 10 Loki had tried to end me 28 times, 29 if you count the snake incident. It's pretty much a family tradition at this point." Thor laughed, grabbing Hela by the waist with a single hand and throwing her into the portal like a fucking spear. "Thor, have you considered?" "I don't know, therapy?" I asked, concerned about his mental stability. "No, why would I?" Thor replied, tilting his head to the side in confusion. "But talking about therapy, do you think Dr. Walker will take Hela too? Maybe making it a package deal, 2 for 1. You mean, Emily? I asked, wondering if he was high. Yes, Thor nodded. Emily wasn't charging you anything, I chuckled. At first, but then Nat came, saying she was her manager, and that Emily's premium services as a therapist were worth Volstagg weight in gold. Thor chuckled, so I paid. I don't know if I should feel proud or concerned, I muttered. Both, the Ancient One replied. Very well, I am proud, Cerned, I chuckled, turning to face Thor once again. I will talk with Nat, maybe she will make an exception, family discount, and stuff, I nodded. Wonderful. I mean, Asgard is rich, but we only have so much gold, Thor chuckled, jumping into the portal with a wink, one that let me know he was okay with Nat taking his gold. He was just being extra for the sake of it. So, now what? The Ancient One asked as the portal Thor had created closed. I mused at her question for a bit, remembering something in the process, the mission to conquer Earth, a mission I had not completed because at the time I was too weak to do so, something that was no longer a variable stopping me from taking action. Now I conquer Earth, I replied. Yes, I'm aware that sounded rather ominous, and that without context would leave me in a bad light, I nodded, feeling her judgmental gaze on my back. Very well then, the Ancient One chuckled, how can I help? Weren't you judging me like a second ago? I snorted. I would never, the Ancient One gasped playfully. But as for help, well, I smiled, as I started to describe in detail what conquering the Earth entailed, and the benefits it would bring, like for example having the power to block the entrance to the planet to dangerous individuals as long as they were below my level. I see, the Ancient One nodded. I like the idea. It would save us a lot of time if we could only keep undesired individuals out of the planet. Yes, I nodded. So, I guess the next question is, what to do with them? The Ancient One asked, pointing at the unconscious Eternals around. Let's ask them, I replied, using a pulse of cosmic energy to not only wake them up but bind them in place. You did it, Ajak muttered as she came back to her senses, looking at me in utter shock. I did, I nodded. He will kill you all, you saved nothing. Ajak shot back, probably referring to the celestial that had ordered her to ensure Tiamat's emergence. Who knows, I smiled while using my map to locate the strongest celestials. Gemia the Analyzer LV 1401, Nizar the Calculator LV 1489, Harjan the Measurer LV 1390, Esos the Searcher LV 1460, Arisham the Judge LV 1701. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Ajak replied. You et one of them, and he will judge you accordingly. I chuckled, maybe, but enough about that. I didn't wake you up so that you could tell me how death I apparently am. I woke you up to talk about your future. We will never work for you, Beasticries spat in clear anger. I didn't ask, I replied, before continuing, but, basically, my offer was, that if you guys want, you can stay on Earth, no need for you guys to fight the deviants and stuff, I will deal with that myself, or rather my group. She killed them all, Ajak replied. But you are not her Thena side, yet, you feel like her. No, rather, she felt like you but corrupted. I guess I didn't notice until now. What we want is inconsequential, Ajak sighed, her eyes staring into mine. Earth is doomed, he will see to it. You think? I hummed, not really worried about that, not because I was stronger than him, but because we both shared a common enemy that was about to wake up any day soon. Null, let me ask him, I smiled, opening a portal to meet the Celestial, who I had a feeling would be more understanding than Ajak imagined. I stepped through the portal to Arisham's location, immediately seeing the giant who towered over me in size, being over 300 miles tall and a few miles wide, emanating nothing but pure cosmic energy in his wake. For a long calculating moment, I simply stared at him, fully aware he knew I was there. In a way, we were both measuring each other up, feeling each other's intentions. "You consumed the seed." Arishem was the first one to break the silence, his voice booming through the empty void of space like an echo in a well. I nodded, looking up at him with a small frown decorating my face. This situation wasn't optimal for communication. It felt like I was talking to an impossibly large building that needed to change it, so without a second thought, I changed my size, matching his, by altering my molecular structure. "What do you seek here?" Arishem, unfazed by my noticeable change, continued. "I came here to make peace, and maybe some alliances," I replied, looking into his red emotionless eyes. "The seed allowed you to consume it," Arishem said, sounding surprised yet calm, somehow coming to the realization of what Tiamat had done. "He chose this path. Was humanity that valuable?" "It was for him," I replied. "After all, the value of something was in the eye of the beholder." "Then we have nothing to discuss," Arishem replied, his eyes flashing bright. "He made his choice, and in turn, a new type of celestial was born, and it is not my prerogative to question that choice, nor judge it, as my title would suggest. While unusual, our kind has been known to have biological children the way organic individuals have. Not that this enters that category, but it's the only example I have of it." "Your Eternals were worried you would want to kill me," I replied, giving the Eternals a side look, who so far had been nothing but silent, staring at Arishem in shock and fright. It was their mission to protect the seed from the deviants. Anything beyond that was out of their mission parameters, Arishem replied, his gaze turning to them. "I can see why they would assume such. Nonetheless, you didn't do anything to warrant judgment. It is clear Tiamat offered his life to you out of his own volition. He chose you to be the new celestial, therefore, judgment it's not necessary." I smiled. This was going better than I imagined. Then again, something told me it would go well. Maybe it was the bit of Tiamat that remained within me that made me feel like it would go well, who knows. "Then, I suppose the next item in our conversation would be the alliance," I replied, hoping that this would go as smoothly as the previous item. "Elaborate," Arishem replied, sounding curious. "As a celestial, albeit an unusual one, you already have our support in your actions, as long as those actions stay within cosmic order. Nonetheless, I am intrigued by your interest in forming an alliance, and therefore would like to know what warrants such a desire." "Null," I replied, and for a brief moment I felt Arishem's energy flicker in a mix of shock and something akin to fear. "Not quite there, but close." "Explain," Arishem replied, his voice cold. "He will wake up, I have foreseen it, and when that time comes, we have to be ready," I sighed, taking a deep breath. "I have no idea when, but it will be soon, by human standards soon, and I would like to have all the hands I can on my corner." For a while, Arishem said nothing, simply staring into me seemingly at a loss for words, and I couldn't blame him. The last time Null was around, he killed several celestials like they were nothing but oversized roaches, so really, who could blame the guy? Eventually, however, Arishem replied, "That is most worrying. His awakening could mean the end of all in creation, that I cannot allow. You can count on us. The Celestials will do their part to maintain the cosmic order of things, the grand design, but I'm afraid that might not be enough." I liked this guy. Even with all his power, he was humble enough to recognize when he was outclassed. "That's all I ask, and don't worry, when the time comes, we will be ready." I had faith I would be ready when the time came. "Preparations must be made," Arishem replied. "Was that all?" I nodded, "Yes." "Well, not technically, I was meaning to ask about the Eternals. Do you have any problems with them staying on Earth, or being free for that matter? No, so if you desire to keep them, so be it. It was their duty to protect the seed. The seed has emerged. Their duty is complete. They are without duty. You are free to give them one so you desire it. It is within your power to do so, Arishem replied, without even giving them a look. Very well, I replied, happy with how easy dealing with him had been. Heck, he was a green dot in my map now. Farewell then, Arishem said, creating a rift between time and space, teleporting out of sight, a few billion light years away, close to another celestial. Perhaps he was passing the word of what we shared. Well, back to Earth. But first I smiled, shrinking back to my normal size, before opening a portal to Earth. Back on Earth, I sat with the Ancient One drinking some tea, as I gave the remaining Eternals time to process. We serve you now. Thena was the first one to approach, smiling in a seemingly emotionless way. I mean, if you want, I shrugged. I'm not really into having sentient slaves, I chuckled. She killed so many of us, Mercury muttered. Oh, right, about that, I smiled, equipping the time stone. I can bring them back, if you want, that is. You can? Ajak asked, daring to hope. He is a celestial, after all, Thena replied. Please, Akris muttered, kneeling on the ground, bring them back, I beg you. Well, that was an unexpected turn of events. I will, give me a second. Resurrecting the Eternals Alice had killed has been super easy, barely an inconvenience. All I had to do was use the time stone to reverse to flow of cosmic energy, and then when the energy was back, reshape it into its original form, using my own power to meld it all together once again. It literally took me like 2 minutes tops, to do it. After that, I relocated with Ajak to a different place to talk about their destiny, about what they wanted to do now. Personally, I had no need for them. I had golems in my attic that could fold their entire group in less than a minute alone. I just wanted them to choose for themselves, as a way to thank them for helping humanity until now. Sure, their reasons to help humanity were about the same as a farmer would have helping their cows, but still, whatever their reasons were, their actions, their results were good. I mean, you know the saying, people sometimes do bad things for the right reasons. Well, I prefer the other way around. People doing good things for the bad reasons. Sure is morally questionable, but who really cares? So, in honor of that, I was giving them a chance to be more than they were supposed to be. You are a celestial, Arishem himself recognized you as such. Ajak sighed, her eyes drained in a mix of confusion and something else that I quite couldn't read. Enough about me, what do you guys want to do? I sighed. You are a celestial, your will, it's our command, Ajak replied, bowing, as I couldn't help but wonder how many times she had said the same thing. It felt so robotic, like it was almost second nature for her. It was uncanny. Yeah, that might work on Judge Judy, but not me. I rolled my eyes. I asked you what you want to do with your life, not what you think I want to hear as a quote-unquote celestial. Ajak said nothing, but within I could feel her hesitation. I know you weren't intending on letting the emergence happen, I sighed, as she looked upon me in mild shock. I know lots of things, stuff I shouldn't possibly know, so please, stop acting and tell me. No, scratch that, do what you want, whatever it is, no need to tell me. I smiled, standing up from the chair I had conjured for our talk. I thank you, Ajak bowed. Fair warning though, if your family gets, well, murdery for the lack of a word, I will, well, I'm sure you get the gist, I winked, teleporting her back to her group before teleporting to mine. Ancient One POV. Alex's power was inconceivably high now, both cosmically speaking and magically speaking. His power was beyond anything I have ever seen, and what's more, it was only the beginning. Alex hadn't consumed a celestial, not really at least, but a seed of one, and even then, the seed was stronger than most fully formed celestials, a singularity amongst them, one that would take thousands upon thousands of years to grow and reach its full potential. But even this cosmic singularity, one that went beyond what a celestial should be, had a very well-marked limit to his growth. By that I mean he was to reach its emerging potential in over 20 years or so. But before he could, Alex consumed him, creating an entirely new singularity, born in the midst of their merging, one that combined both Alex's infinite potential for growth, and the Celestial's innate power to absorb cosmic energy generated from intelligent life. Each Celestial has a clear limit, one they had imposed upon them since their seeding. After all, each seed was different. Once they reached said limit, that innate power of them to absorb cosmic energy passively, simply, disappears, which in turn starts their emerging process. Key point being that limit, one Alex lacks. Now, imagine a celestial without limits, one with infinite capacity for growth, for cosmic energy. That was Alex, who in a way, had become more than a celestial itself, a seed, one that would grow for all of eternity, consuming the cosmic power intelligent life creates around him. I could now only wonder, what awaited him at the end of the road. Then again, I guess it didn't matter, after all, I would be there to see it anyway, like I had been for every step of his way. Alex Walker POV. I wanted the Infinity Stones. Yes, I know I said against Null they would be nothing but pretty jewelry, but I still wanted them. Because while Null was out of their reach in terms of power, I was, because unlike him, I was alive, and frankly sharing a weakness with Superman wasn't on my wish list. So, I had decided to collect the stones. Or rather, have others to do it. I mean, I already knew Thanos had one stone, the Mind Stone. And that the remaining two, the Soul Stone and the Reality Stone, were in other dimensions. One required a sacrifice, and the other required time, or power to break the dimension open, power I now had. Sadly, I couldn't break the dimension where the Soul Stone was like I could with the Reality Stone, because the stone wasn't hiding on a dimension itself, but on an idea, a concept so to speak, one that was both attainable, yet unreadable, meaning I either sacrificed that what I loved the most, or I picked or manipulate someone to do it for me. Which is why I started Operation Thanos Prime. As Amazon Prime, my plan was simple. I would spread rumors across the universe about an old spirit living on a desolate planet that spoke about the stone and let the domino effect do the rest. I estimated Thanos would be visiting the old man within a year or so, and from there, well, it was all a waiting game. I feel bad for Gamora though. With Operation Thanos Prime officially on the go, it was time to focus on my next item, conquering the Earth, but not really. The quest of the day, or week, who knows how long it will take me, as there were many things to consider, details more than not. So I had the Ancient One taking care of that. At times I feel like I should have her on a 6-figure salary, maybe a 7-figure salary. Anyway, in the meantime, I was focusing on other matters, like planning for Null's arrival. What can I say? My agenda has been quite busy this week, but back to Null. As I planned for him, I sadly realized I was more unprepared than I first imagined. My original plans were simple, rather straightforward so to speak, and that was collecting the Infinity Stones, and using their power against him. Unfortunately, I soon found out, that would not be possible. Why? Well, allow me to explain. At the dawn of the universe, there was nothing. Then, at the forge of creation, the Big Bang sent 6 elemental crystals hurtling across the virgin universe. These crystals were known as the Infinity Stones, with each controlling an essential aspect of existence. Now, where is the problem in all that? Well, the problem is that Null existed before existence. He was there before the dawn of the universe. He was there before time, space, anything for that matter. He existed before everything, including life, for life was created later, through the hands of the Celestials. Null existed before the very fucking concept of life and death, meaning he's older than one primordial beings in creation, which also means he's immortal. Well, technically the term with him is immortal. What's immortality? I'm glad you asked, voice in my head. Immortality differs from any form of immortality in a fundamental essence, which is defined as a living being who cannot die, while immortality means entities who cannot die because they were never alive, to begin with. Almost like a ghost, but not really, because ghosts were once living beings, and Null was never that. To put it on better terms, Null is forever frozen in a state of unbirth, rendering him unable to die due to not being alive at all, to begin with. Meaning he essentially lives in a state that's considered neither dead nor alive. Meaning that not only that the stones can't affect him, because he's a being outside their realm entirely, but death as well. Which explains why they sealed him instead of killing him in the first place, because the latter was impossible to achieve. But, fortunately for me, even immortals can die, which, on itself, it's a paradox. I will get a headache with that aside. While immortals were certainly the closest thing to true immortals I knew for the moment being, that they were not invincible, with them still susceptible to certain things, like for one, being erased, which came in handy with my skill, or being given life. What do I mean by giving life? Well, exactly that, giving life to him. Granted, both ways required me to be well above his level, which I wasn't, but it was good to know there were solutions. I suppose I can do the Null time walking dungeon for training. I amused at the idea. I mean, fighting against Null, or at least a copy of him, would give me a general idea of what to expect. Then again, I could also save myself the hassle, and use the time stone to see him, but that would open the possibility of being caught, which would not be ideal. Bottom line is, that I have some options. Dangerous options, but options nonetheless. As I dwelled on the Null subject for hours without a clear path to take, I started to experiment with powers I had obtained after absorbing Tiamat. If anything, to pass the time amongst them, there was the ability to create sentient life, from humans to Eternals. How cool was that? Of course, I wasn't quite ready to create my own species, and the implications that brought, so I decided to create something simple, a dog. Sure, it wasn't an adventurous project, but it was good enough for me. Needless to say, the dog I created wasn't a normal dog. Let's just say, to short the story up, that I got creative while playing around with my Bible-like powers and ended up creating the Marvel's version of Crypto the dog. An Eternal-based dog, using a golden retriever as an aesthetic base. Fernando de la Vega Walker, Eternal Dog, LV 244. He picked his name. I'll be honest. I have no idea what went wrong with him, like, for some reason he acts like a telenovela actor, from Spain. It is Fernando de la Vega Walker. Primero. Oh yeah, he talks and barks. Didn't I tell you I was working and I wanted to be left alone? I asked with a sigh. Indeed you did, but since then, 2 whole long painful minutes have passed. And I, Fernando de la Vega Walker, Primero, can't leave my honorable owner alone. It is my duty to protect you. It is written in the Code of Dogs. A code I uphold with my life. Code of, he has been alive for 10 minutes. I sighed. Maybe next time I'll test my powers with something less excitable. A turtle maybe. Wanna go for a walk? A walk. I knew doing my duty would eventually bring this poor dog his reward. To think I Fernando'd at this. I glared at him. His name thing was getting old, which was to say something. He was 10 minutes old or so. I apologize, honorable master. I shall refrain from saying my Kalient name. I snorted. Hot name my ass. Sure. By the way, I have a cat, I added. That's no problem. As the superior pet, I shall protect that inferior being. Loving him, or her, with the love only a superior pet can offer. Fernando barked, wagging his tail, as he put one paw on his furry chest. I should warn him about the tentacles, but I kinda want to see how this unfolds. Sure. The girls loved Fernando, the eternal dog, Emily more than Nat, who was a bit weirded out by his mannerism, which I really couldn't blame her for. I wonder where I went wrong with him. Dad, can you make Goose talk? Emily asked, holding Fernando like a plushie against her chest. I mused at the idea. In theory, it should be possible, but that would entail giving the animal in question more intelligence, and frankly, I wasn't sure I wanted a talking Xulu model cat. Maybe, I replied, giving her a small smile. Can you try? Plessy. And there it is, the big dog eyes. But señorita, I am the only talking pet and protector this family needs. Fernando protested, his once wagging tail now frozen. I sighed, rolling my eyes. I will look into it, but I promise nothing. I smiled, kissing her forehead. Fernando was a creation, made from my very own energy. I made his body, mind, and soul, capable of withstanding a higher level of sentience, one beyond a dog, one comparable to that of a human. With Goose, on the other hand, I would have to alter her on a fundamental level, something I have yet to try, and could end very poorly. I see. Emily nodded. Besides sis, let's first see how having one talking pet feels like. It might annoy us. Nat smirked, giving Fernando a quick glance. Annoy you? I would never. I am the perfect pet, señorita. I'm loyal, I'm fluffy. I'm absurdly handsome. And powerful. What else would anyone want from a dog? Fernando huffed. He's adorable. Emily giggled, hugging Fernando tighter. Indeed. I am. Fernando obviously agreed with her. So, between you and me, Dad, Nat muttered, getting close enough for me to hear her. Was his personality something you picked, or was that random? No idea, I replied, chuckling under my breath. Don't worry, señorita, you will grow to love me. I mean, look at my paws. Fernando barked, putting one of his paws up for Nat to see. How did you? Oh, right, dogs have significantly better hearing than humans, Nat sighed. I laughed, wondering what was next. A talking goldfish named Klaus. Now that's an idea, making a super-powered talking goldfish capable of destroying armies. I mean, can you imagine the look on a robber's face when he has to fight a goldfish? I might just do it for shits and giggles. I might even add a crow or a raven to the mix, just to annoy Odin. Leaving Fernando with the girls with one clear directive, protecting them at all costs. I had lunch with Sif, who I hadn't seen in a while, as our schedules had been tight with many events during the last month. We talked about stuff, nothing in particular, and watched some TV before she had to return to her daily duties, and I to mine. In my office, I followed up on my last endeavors, the ones Fernando and his antics had interrupted, like Operation Thanos, and the recovery of the Reality Stone. The rumors had yet to reach Thanos, but I wasn't too worried about that. Sooner or later, the big purple man would hear my lies, and when he did, I had beacons of energy spread across the universe, beacons that would alert me the moment he heard what I had spread, or one of their generals discovered. In case none of the above heard my lies and other, power-hungry beings tried to find where the stone was, I had golems set in place, golems that were powerful enough to take on Thanos with ease. After all, only the ears of the Titan were privy to the information I was to give. So, all and all, the only thing I had to focus on right now, beyond the imminent wake of Null, was the Reality Stone. I guess I could get it now. I mean, there wasn't anything stopping me from doing that, so why wait? I guess my mind has been otherwise occupied with stuff. Oh well, time to break into a sealed dimension, I chuckled, equipping the Space Stone, who in conjecture with my cosmic power should easily break the seal that kept the Reality Stone pocket dimension away, giving me access to the stone and the elves that were locked away with it. Right, I had almost forgotten, the elves. Now this brings up a good point. What to do with the Dark Elves? As far as I know, they were the sworn enemies of Asgard, as were the Frost Giants, so, was I to offer them a chance like Thor did with the Frost Giants? Or to deal with them like pests? I hummed, deciding that a decision like this required more information. After all, I couldn't decide the fate of a race on a whim with no data to make an educated choice. Smiling, I opened a system and accessed the search function to find out everything there was to know about the Dark Elves. From there, I would make my choice. Searching. Dark Elves. Dark Elves. The Dark Elf race originated in the Ginnung Gap, also known as the Yawning Abyss, a place of primordial darkness that existed prior to the creation of the universe, where they reigned absolute and unchallenged, serving their master. When their master fell to the Blade of Light, and the universe came into being at the hands of the Celestials and other civilizations quickly arose, the Dark Elves sought the return of their master by reverting the universe to its former state of darkness, one ruled by the one true king. To achieve this end, their leader, the sorcerer Malekith, acquired the Reality Stone, using it to make a weapon capable of changing the very fabric of reality as a whole. With it, their plan was simple: bring the universe back to its original state, and serve Null once more. Their first attempt was stopped by Bor. Their second attempt was stopped by Odin. I read the information given to me many times over, letting everything sink in. Of all the things I expected to read about them, about their crimes, about their personal vendetta against Asgard, none even remotely included the slightest possibility of them being servants of Null. To think I would find this on a chance. Had I not decided to read the information, I would have probably given them a chance, shrugging their hostilities as grudges of the past, like I had done with the Frost Giants, in this case, inadvertently giving Null more allies for his wake. Time to collect the stone. There wasn't any doubt anymore about what I had to do. They were enemies, and they would be eliminated. In war, mercy is a weakness. Well, hello there, darling. Talking about merciful weaknesses. Hela, I greeted, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. Don't frown, darling, you'll get wrinkles. Hela winked, walking toward me. As grateful as I am for your help during my time of need, I require to know the reason for this visit, I replied, looking at her with a calm look. Well, Thor wanted you to give me your blessing to get the therapy with your daughter. Hela sighed, looking away. It's apparently doing wonders with Loki, or so he says. Powerful as Thor is, he's blind to the truths of others, and it seems to be that case, especially with Loki. And you aren't that case? I replied, raising an eyebrow. Oh, darling, I am bad to the core, no question about it. Hela snorted, waving her arms back. Unlike Loki though, I don't try to hide. I even asked for an execution, but Thor seems to be a king all about mercy, so here I am, asking for therapy. I chuckled, at least you're honest. Well, I can't be all bad, can I? Hela smirked. So, you want this? I mean, you do realize I will seal your powers while you do so, right? I asked, tilting my head. I know, not that having them would make much of a difference. Hela rolled her eyes. Thor can kill me with a look, and you can atomize me from across the universe, so powers or not, I am irrelevant. As to want this, not really, but let's not say Hela never tried, she chuckled. Very well, I snapped my fingers, sending a wave of energy her way, sealing her powers, and locking her age around Emily's. Well, this is new, Hela commented, her voice sounding like that of a child, as she marveled at her new /old form. You will get your powers when therapy does its job, I informed her. What did I mean by that? Well, the moment her dot in the map changed to a welcoming green, she would be free. Very well, Hela nodded, I'll be checking my very unqualified doctor. You do that, I replied, closing the door as she left. Now where was I? Right, the reality stone. Space stone equipped, I teleported to the place where the reality stone last time had been, using that point as a beacon of connection. From there, I pushed my energy into the stone, focusing my mind and power to search for the reality stone. At first, I felt nothing but empty space between dimensions, but eventually, I felt a pulse, one very similar to that of the space stone, but more distorted, more chaotic in essence. That has to be it, I nodded, pushing my hands forward, before grabbing the literal veil of space and pulling it apart like a paper sheet, creating a vortex that connected both my reality and that of the elves as one, at least temporarily. It had been so easy to create a rift between dimensions. Power really makes things easier. Vortex opened, I cracked my neck and dived right in, my objectives clear, collecting the stone, and killing them all. Landing on the other side of the vortex, I found myself in a place of absolute darkness. No matter where I looked, it was as if my eyes were closed. This is annoying, I sighed, creating a ball of light with enough power to illuminate the entire dimension like a sun would. What can I say? Being a celestial has its perks. Heck, I could have created a sun, but that seemed like a bit overkill for the situation. For now, the ball will do. Smiling, I looked around to slowly find myself being disappointed. The place looked like crap, like a dark moisty cave with dark rocks, and more dark rocks. I almost lamented creating a source of light. I feel like by doing that I had hurt my eyes. Oh well, I didn't come here to sightsee, I came here to collect a stone, and commit genocide, I sighed, frowning at how bad that sounded. I really need to rephrase my sentences better. People will think I'm the bad guy if I keep doing that shit. I chuckled, looking back at the vortex. It would be very irresponsible to leave this unguarded, I hummed. After all, if one escaped, it would make my job harder than it had any right to be. A barrier would avoid that much. Nodding, I created a barrier around the vortex and started on my journey to collect the stone, which happened to be 3 minutes away on foot. Surprisingly enough, not a single red dot was anywhere to be seen, at least close to me. There were thousands upon thousands a few miles away, but close to me, or the reality stone for that matter, none. 3 minutes later, I found myself face to face with yet again, another dark rocky structure, this one shaped like a temple, which was a nice change of scenery at the very least. By that point, the red dots spread across the dimension were on the move, all rushing to a single point. I guess bringing the day to a world without a sun makes it hard to go incognito. They would reach me in 4 minutes. That was 4 minutes more than I needed, 3 if I took a piss on their temple. I hummed, crossing my legs. The question now was, to pee now, or to pee later? I guess now. I mean, I will erase this dimension soon enough, so why bother? I continued walking through the temple the Dark Elves had built, without paying much attention to its craftsmanship. My mind was otherwise occupied trying to come up with a solution for the null problem. But no matter how hard I dwelled on the thought, no ideas came to mind. I suppose I need to focus on something else for the moment being, I sighed, following the path to the stone, as from the distance, the sounds of steps were heard, each step creating a faint echo in its wake. I had no need to check to know who it was. I guess I took my time if they managed to reach me. I do hope you've settled in. The accommodations in our realm are a bit sparse, I know, Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves greeted as he walked towards me. What are you doing here? I asked, turning around to face him. I came here to negotiate, Malekith replied, a faint smile washing over his face. Not interested, I replied, turning back before resuming my walk to the reality stone. Whatever he had to offer, I didn't want it. Besides, what use do I have listening to a soon-to-be death man? You won't be able to keep them safe, Malekith replied, following me close behind while keeping a respectful distance from me. I frowned, trying hard to ignore him. You know that to be true, Malekith added, his voice echoing in my ears in a honeyed rhapsody. Once again, I ignored him. All life is his to end, Malekith stated in a tone full of admiration. I stopped walking, turning around to face him. I have no idea why I even take the time to talk to you, but here it is. No matter how powerful Null is, I will find a way to vanquish him, permanently this time, keeping everyone I care safe. Perhaps, Malekith conceded, chuckling under his breath, but perhaps not, as it is right now, no one is safe. But you can change that. What was his game? Was he trying to distract me while someone took the stone? No, his forces are outside the temple, doing nothing. Was he really attempting to make me join Null? You seem remarkably calm for someone with a few minutes left to live, I replied, staring into his eyes. What's the point of fighting the inevitable? Malekith shrugged. I know for a fact, you have the power to wipe us without trying, so what's the point of getting all worked up? I know my destiny should you decide to end me, just like I know yours, should you decide to refuse our master's offer. He smiled, his hand pointing towards the path that led to the stone. Go on, take the stone, it is yours, after all. I frowned. This whole interaction was strange. When I came here, I expected a different development, a violent one, but this was unexpected, and I didn't like it, but somehow it was vexing enough to keep me from ending Malekith. What's your game, Malekith? I asked while resuming my walk to the stone. I am but a messenger, Malekith replied while following me, one with an offer for you, one you are free to reject, but why would you? Speak then, so that you might die without remorse, I replied, opening the door that led to the chamber that held the stone. You can fight our king, or you can seek another way, joining our master in his quest, Malekith replied. I snorted. That's your offer? You really need to learn how to negotiate. I won't become his pawn or anyone's pawn for that matter, not now, not ever. He will get what he desires, one way or another, Malekith replied, walking beside me. Do you realize every bad guy says that, right? I rolled my eyes, opening the container that held the stone. You seem to be mistaken. Our king is not a bad guy or a good guy for that matter, he's the true face of the universe, the darkness behind every corner, Malekith replied. Are you done jacking him off? I asked, my eyes on the stone, or rather the liquid that was the stone. I had almost forgotten the reality stone needed reshaping before it was added to the Infinity Gauntlet. The reality stone, legendary item, ether state. The reality stone is one of the 6 infinity stones, the remnant of a singularity that predated the universe itself, representing the element of reality. It gives the user the power to mold reality as a whole. The higher the will, the better the results. Ether state equals the reality stone was at one point liquefied and called the ether by the Dark Elves and their leader Malekith, who intended to use it to revert the universe to its state of primordial darkness, in an attempt to bring their king back. I would reforge it later. For now, the inventory. Reality stone acquired. He will spare your loved ones, your world, and all you have to do is serve him. He will allow a small speck of light to remain, as long as he has your loyalty. Why fight for worlds that won't thank you? For people, beings, that would betray you without a second thought, Malekith replied, walking in front of me. Your world will remain, your people, those you care about, those you are about to fight for. You will get what you want, and he will get what it should have been. Maybe I wasn't clear enough before, so as to leave this conversation done, I will reword my previous answer. I smiled, closing my eyes a bit. I will never, ever, become an instrument of death, a weapon to be used for others. I fight only for my cause, I fight only for my convictions, and serving Null will never align with those things. So, you see yourself as an instrument of life? Malekith asked, smiling in a concerning way. Why for? Why favor life? Why favor light? Life will end, one day or another. All life will come to an end, be it by his hand, or not, so why fight for that momentary flicker, that torment, where every cruel second it's a countdown to the inevitable? Why? So just because everything will eventually come to an end, we must give up? I snorted, rolling my eyes. Imagine what you two could accomplish together. Imagine how much unnecessary suffering can be avoided. He will show them mercy, by ending them all, Malekith added. I sighed. This conversation had gone long enough, it was time to end this, but before that, one question: how did your king know about me? It was foretold, eons before your birth, a night of light or darkness would come, and that in our world, his path would start, but that no matter what path he picked, darkness would be his end, be it by free will, or subjugation, Malekith replied, and it was easy to see he believed every word that came out of his mouth, every single one. I see, another prophecy, I chuckled. It wouldn't be the first one I break, nor it will be the last, I imagine. I smiled, patting the elf on the head before walking past him. So you choose the path of subjugation, Malekith replied, sighing. I smiled, more like the path where he attempts to subjugate me, but fails to do so. Beyond that, I have to thank you. You have given me perspective. Your words have shown me, Null is desperate enough to look for alliances, meaning he's not all too sure about his victory, about his darkness to come. So for that, thank you. Now rest in peace. With that said and done, I used erasure on all the elves, effectively driving their race to extinction. I left the Dark Elves dimension, teleporting to my office in Asgard, not before using my power to destroy the entire place down to nothing. While it was true I had erased their race from the face of the universe, and their dimension was now an empty place surrounded by darkness, I wanted to take no risks. For all I knew, leaving that place intact would come to bite me in the ass later, so I was taking precautions, so to speak. 4 stones, I muttered, looking at my inventory. 2 more, and I would have the set. Just had to wait for Thanos to help me with the last one, and I would be done with it. Mr. Walker, the Ancient One, greeted me as she portaled to my office. Hi, I smiled, apparating a cup of steamy tea for her. The Ancient One chuckled, tilting her head a bit. You seem to be in a great mood. May I inquire the reason for such? I just learned Null is a bit worried about me. I smiled, wondering if I had worded that out fine. How so? The Ancient One frowned, taking the cup of tea I had summoned for her, before taking a seat. Well, on my way to collecting the Reality Stone, I learned that those who held the stone were servants of Null, and through them, I learned a bunch of things. I smiled, summoning a can of Coke and a glass with ice. Their leader, Malekith, offered me a deal, to join his king in servitude, in exchange of keeping what I love. At first, I was a bit angry, you know, my deal with Hydra and stuff, but then, I realized, why would someone that seeks to end all life, offer me a deal where life remains? I mean, sure, the rest of the universe would die, but, in the end, with that deal, life would remain. Isn't it a bit odd, that someone looking to end all in creation, is offering to keep part of it? The Ancient One nodded. He was either trying to trick you, and kill you at your weakest, or, he's worried about you. Exactly, I nodded. Either way, both things mean, he's concerned about the role I will play during the war that is to come. Concerned enough to use tricks or concessions. I find it odd though, the Ancient One replied, taking a sip of her tea. From what you told me about him, this is way out of character. Did Malekith tell you anything else? He told about a prophecy, one that supposedly includes me. I nodded, about how a knight of light or darkness would pick his path, and that no matter what the knight picked, he would serve, be it out of his own volition, or by subjugation. That gives us something to start planning, the Ancient One replied. It's clear he intends to use you, or way or another. With that in mind, we can prepare some countermeasures for such. I nodded, while I doubted he would be able to dominate my will. Preparing for every outcome was the best way to ensure victory. I might need to collect the Mind Stone. Its powers could possibly give me a mental edge, in case he tries to break my will. The stones are useless against him, nonetheless. They are not against you, the Ancient One nodded. You need both the Mind Stone and the Soul Stone, both represent the aspects of free will. With them, you should reach a level of enlightenment beyond normal possibilities. After all, you can't subjugate an indomitable mind, or corrupt an unshakable soul. Sadly, I must wait for Thanos to collect the Soul Stone, I sighed, frowning ever so slightly. The sacrifice, right? The Ancient One nodded. Yes, the Soul Stone is in a dimension outside creation. In an astral plane beyond reach. The key to that plane is suffering and death, both sacrifices I will never be willing to make. I nodded. But one, the Mad Titan is willing to make, the Ancient One replied, finishing her tea. Yes, I nodded, opening my can of Coke, and pouring it into my glass. Any ideas when the Titan will take the bait? The Ancient One asked. Soon, I hoped, but beyond that, I had no idea. Within a month or two, if the information reaches his ears. That's a good enough time frame, she nodded. In the meantime, however, it's time we make some preparations, like recovering the part of your soul you bound to the dark dimension, I replied, taking a sip of my Coke. While I'm happy you wish to recover what I lost, I don't see how that would help us, the Ancient One replied. Call me cliché, but I believe you will never be at your strongest without being whole, I replied with a shrug. I see, the Ancient One chuckled, then I won't complain. Beyond that, I also wish to start making some weapons to fight the hordes of symbiotes we will face, I replied. Why not destroy the planet? The Ancient One inquired. Well, he's sealed in there, and I have no idea if destroying the planet would break him free, so I rather avoid touching that place until it's absolutely necessary, I replied. After all, the last thing I wanted was waking him up before time. No, right now, what I wanted was to prepare, and be ready for when the time came. A wise course of action then, the Ancient One nodded in approval, before asking, what do we know of our enemy? His troops, I mean. They are parasites, in a way at least, as they require a body to be a real threat. Once they get a body, regardless of what body they get, they increase the overall strength of that person, animal, or cadaver, many times over, but in the process, they take control of the being. Only those with an incredibly strong will can overcome such a mental challenge. Now, this is without Null in the picture. When you add Null's influence to the matter, I doubt anyone would be able to resist them, I replied, taking a deeper breath. Their known weaknesses are fire and loud sounds, which makes preparing for them easy enough. What makes them dangerous though is their numbers. They move and act like a horde, at least according to my information, an army of soldiers that will blindly follow any order given, regardless of the consequences. If I recall correctly, you told me that if you managed to become the only organization on Earth, on the magical area at least, you would be able to ban others from entering the planet, as long as they were weaker than you. Would that work on this particular case? She asked. I honestly had no idea. Technically, it should work that way, as I was leagues above the symbiotes in power, but I had no idea if, during the war, the symbiotes would be considered an extension of Null, which would make them bypass the ban by a technicality. Maybe, I sighed, rubbing my temples. Chances are, the symbiotes will be considered a part of Null, therefore, bypassing the ban. Besides, I doubt Null will come specifically to Earth. Knowing what I know about him, he will most likely attack everything and everyone at the same time, amassing an army of soldiers using his ever-expanding symbiotes to possess the universe until there is nothing but darkness. Then we should probably set some wards around his planet, the Ancient One replied, frowning. Not directly on the planet. As you said, we don't want to mess with the seal if we don't know how our actions will affect it. But we can place some ward around the planet, maybe on the moon, if the planet has one, to seal them from leaving, or at least slow them down enough. I'm used at the idea. Well, considering how powerful Null is, chances are that won't slow him down at all, but it's worth the try. I'll get on that then, the Ancient One nodded before standing up. I will let you know once the wards are ready. I smiled. In the meantime, you should focus on getting stronger. As things are, you are our strongest warrior, by far, and if you are not capable of handling him, everything will be for naught, the Ancient One added, before teleporting away. What a way to finish a conversation, I sighed. Did she really have to finish this chat in the most ominous way possible? That's it for the video, guys. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe. Also tell me in the comment section which kind of fanfiction you would like to watch next, or if you have any recommendation.